The wind howled like a living thing, tearing through the alpine pass with wild fury. Snow flew sideways, needle-sharp, lashing at Lucas's face as he pressed forward, his gloved hands gripping the straps of his pack. With each step, the icy crust beneath his boots cracked and groaned, as if the mountain itself warned him to turn back. But he didn't. He never did. His breath came hard, visible in thick puffs, and yet the silence in his chest was louder than the storm. He wasn't just fighting the cold, he was surviving it, embracing it. Out here, there was no grief, no questions, no memories to dodge. Just pain, snow, and the endless march forward. 2 winters had passed since the avalanche took her. Since. The mountains gave him silence and took everything else. Lucas didn't speak much anymore. He didn't need to. Not to the few hikers he sometimes passed. Not to the shopkeeper who occasionally mailed his supplies. The wind was his company now, the frost his mirror. The only sound he trusted was the crunch beneath his feet and the wind slicing past his ears like a warning. This solitude wasn't loneliness. It was a refuge. Grief was easier to carry when no one asked how you were holding up. Lucas knew this trail, every bend, every boulder. He had walked it countless times in silence, never once startled. But today, something pressed against his. Awareness, a twitch in his gut, a weight in his chest that wasn't from the cold. He glanced around, pulling his scarf tighter. The trees groaned with frost. The snow thickened. The daylight dimmed. And yet the unease stayed. A strange tension lingered on the wind-like breath held too long, like eyes watching from somewhere unseen. Lucas didn't believe in ghosts, but right now the mountain didn't feel empty. It stopped him mid-step, a sound beneath the storm. Not wind, not rock, not an animal. Scratch, pause, scratch, soft, repetitive, like something or someone trapped. And trying, he turned, holding his breath, eyes narrowing as snow blew across his vision. The sound was so faint he wasn't sure if it was real or just memory echoing through the ice. But it came again, steady and rhythmic. This Perettia's pulse quickened. Lucas stood still, the storm raging around him, as if the mountain itself was urging him to listen. He shook his head, blinked through the flurries. Maybe it was nothing. A branch scraping rock, the wind teasing a hollow, but the sound had rhythm, purpose, and something in his gut told him this wasn't just the wind playing games. He glanced down the slope, scanning the jagged whitened shadows. There between the drifts, narrow opening, dark, still, hidden. He hesitated. The smart thing would be to keep walking. The storm was worsening, and he still had an hour to reach the cabin. But something deeper, older stirred in him. A feeling he hadn't allowed in years. Concern, curiosity, a flicker of compassion. One step, then another. Snow caved slightly beneath his boots as he veered off the trail. The cold nipped through the seams of his coat. The sound was louder now, no longer ignoble scratching, a pause, then again, like a call for help muffled by snow and silence. He crouched near the opening, steadying himself on the rocks. It was a shallow cave, just big enough to shelter something small or someone small. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, all he heard was wind and heartbeats, his own and something else then. A low, ragged breath emerged from the shadows inside. Lucas leaned in, and the world he had sealed off so tightly began to crack. Lucas crouched near the cave mouth, holding his breath. The wind screamed behind him, rattling across the ridge, but underneath it a sound. a soft, ragged whimper. He leaned closer. It wasn't the wind, it was painful. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the snow-drifted entrance, something was alive, weak, crying out not for attention, but for mercy. Lucas's heart, dulled by grief and seasons of silence, stirred. He adjusted his pack, pulled out a flashlight, and cautiously ducked inside the narrow space. The cave was shallow, more a crevice than a shelter, but enough to block the wind. Ice clung to the rocks. His boots crunched on frozen earth. He swept the beam across the interior, and then he saw her. There, huddled near the far wall, was a dog thin, motionless, and covered in a dusting of snow. Her coat, once likely thick and golden, was matted and dull. She didn't bark or run. She just stared. Amber's eyes met his, not pleading, not trusting, but alive. Barely. Her gaze was guarded, but not empty. There was something behind it, a flicker, a question. Lucas didn't move. Neither did she. The storm raged outside, but in the stillness of that cave, time held its breath. He lowered the light slightly, so it didn't blind her. "You're not supposed to be here," he murmured, his voice rasping from disuse. Then again, neither. Was one. He took one slow step forward, squinting. The closer he looked, the more brutal the truth became. Her front paw was swollen and smeared with dried blood. Her ribs poked through her coat like a sharpened bone. A rope hung loosely from her neck frayed, knotted and stained, not a leash. A tether. Whoever had owned her hadn't loved her, and whatever she'd run from, it was enough to send her into the arms of a storm. Lucas clenched his jaw. Part of him wanted to turn away. He wasn't built for this anymore. Not for caring. Not for saving anyone. He could barely keep himself stitched together most days, but he couldn't walk away. Not this time. A low growl rolled from her chest horse, unsteady. She shifted slightly, her muscles tensing beneath brittle fur. It wasn't fear, it was instinct. Lucas paused again, lowering to a knee, still several feet away. His fingers trembled not from cold, but from something deeper. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered, unsure why he was even speaking. Maybe to her, maybe to himself. "I just don't want to leave you here." She didn't growl again, just watched, quiet, waiting, and in that moment, Lucas felt it. The same feeling he'd buried beneath snow and silence for 2 years. Vulnerability. The wind outside howled again, as if reminding him he had minutes, not hours. He moved forward slowly, inch by inch, his breath steady. The dog didn't move as he reached her, didn't flinch when he slipped off his heavy parka. He placed it gently over her back, careful not to touch her wounds. The fabric engulfed her. Small frame, she twitched, startled, then stilled, her breathing shallow but steady. "I don't know your story," Lucas murmured, eyes stinging more from memory than cold. "But I know what it's like to lose everything." It wasn't heroism. It wasn't logical. It was memory and, maybe, hope. She was surprisingly light, bones wrapped in fur. He lifted her gently, one arm under her chest, the other beneath. Her hind legs. She gave a soft grunt of pain but didn't resist. Outside, the storm waited. The snow had grown deeper, and the trail would be harder now. But Lucas didn't hesitate. He adjusted his grip, shielding her body with his. As he began the slow march back to his cabin, he could feel her breathing shaky, but real against his chest. For the first time in a long time, Lucas wasn't walking for himself. He was carrying something fragile, something worth saving, and, though he didn't know it yet, This was the beginning of being saved, too. Back at the cabin, Lucas laid her gently near the fireplace, tucking blankets around her fragile body. He placed a bowl of water and some soft meat on the wooden floor, then stepped back to give her space. She didn't move, just stared. He waited silent, careful not wanting to crowd her. Minutes passed, still nothing, but when he turned away, busied himself with the stove, he heard the faintest sound, the quiet clink of her nose nudging the bowl. Lucas smiled faintly. So, you'll eat. Just not if I'm watching. It became a routine. He left food, walked away. She ate. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something, a beginning. On the third day, Lucas sat across from her as she lay curled near the hearth. Her eyes, though still guarded, didn't flinch when he looked at her now. You need a name, he said softly. Something that fits who you are, not who they made you. He thought for a long while before whispering, Freya. It felt right. A name of resilience, of queens and warriors and gods. She blinked slowly. No reaction, but that night, when he said it again, good night. Freya, her ears twitched, and in the silence, Lucas felt something shift. Freya never made a sound. No growls, no whimpers, only silence and eyes that studied him as if they were reading a language long forgotten. Lucas noticed how she tracked his movements, tilting her head when he read aloud from old journals or muttered to himself while chopping wood, how she never seemed to sleep deeply, always alert, always watching. She didn't trust him, not fully, but she was curious, and Lucas, in his own way, was just as uncertain. He'd lost so much, felt so hollow, but now, with her there breathing, healing, he began to feel. Present, the storm rolled in, fast. Snow thrashed against the windows. Lucas sat near the fire, a cup of tea in hand, warmth soaking into his skin. Freya had kept her distance all day, watchful, quiet. But as the cabin groaned under the wind's weight, something changed. He didn't notice her at first, but then movement. Slow, cautious. She crept toward him on trembling legs and lowered herself beside his feet. She didn't touch him, just laid her head on the floor near his boots. He didn't speak. He simply reached down, hand hovering over her head, until she shifted ever so slightly, just enough to let him rest his palm gently against her fur. She closed her eyes, and Lucas exhaled. The gash on her paw had grown inflamed. Lucas boiled water, pulled out gauze, and sat on the floor beside her. She didn't resist as he gently cleaned the wound. Didn't growl or pull away. I used to do this for someone else, he said quietly. His voice shook not from cold this time. She was clumsy, always cutting herself on something. I kept a drawer just for bandages. Freya watched him, not blinking, not judging. As he wrapped the paw, Lucas kept talking, not for her, for himself. She was the reason I came up here, or the reason I stayed. The cabin was silent except for the crackle of fire, but her presence was loud in his heart. By week's end, Freya was strong enough to walk outside. Lucas kept the leash loose, never tugging, never letting, just walking beside her. The snow was lighter now, the air calmer, for the first time. There was peace in the forest, but peace never lasted long. A sudden crack like a branch snapping or a gunshot echoing through trees. Freya flinched. Then I ran. Freya, Lucas called, his heart seizing as she vanished between the trees. Freya, he gave chase. Every footstep is a flashback of loss, of helplessness. Snow flying. His breath was sharp. His voice was hoarse. He searched for hours, his mind screaming the worst, until finally he saw tracks, blood, a slide down a narrow path, and then her whimper. She was wedged between ice and stone, her back leg twisted, her fur dusted with frost. When Lucas approached, she didn't growl, didn't move. She just looked at him eyes-wide, trusting. He slid down, careful, whispering her name. When he reached for her, she didn't resist. As he lifted her into his arms, she pressed her head against his chest. No panic, no fight, just surrender, and Lucas. He felt something break open inside him. Not pain this time, not grief, not relief, and love. That night, Lucas laid a blanket near the hearth as usual, but Freya walked right past it. She lay down beside his cot, her body curled against the side, her back gently brushing his hand. He didn't say anything, just let his fingers rest against her fur, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. For the first time in years, he slept deeply. No dreams, no ghosts, only warmth, only Freya. Lucas first noticed them on his way back from gathering firewood to deep ruts slicing through the pristine snow. To clean, to fresh. No one came this far, not unless they had a reason. He knelt down, running his gloved fingers along the tread. The pattern was wide. A truck, maybe. Not the rangers, not anyone he knew. Freya stood behind him at a distance, her ears perked, her body tense. She hadn't growled, but something in her posture screamed unease. Lucas turned to her. "You know this scent, don't you?" She didn't move, but her eyes said everything. The next day, he stopped by the ranger station to check on supplies. The ranger, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm voice, leaned in and said, "There's been talk. Someone's looking for a shepherd. Thin female, scarred paw, limping. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Lucas felt his gut turn. Why, they think she's part of a dogfighting operation out of Munich. Busted up months ago, but some of the dogs disappeared before the raid. The image of Freya in the cave, bloodied, starved, tied with that rope, hit him like ice water. He didn't answer, but the pit in his stomach grew deeper. It was early morning when the knock came up impatient. Lucas opened the door to a broad-shouldered man in a leather jacket, holding a file in one hand and a smirk in the other. "Sorry to bother you, friend," the man said. "Looking for a dog. Lost a while back. Sweet girl, German shepherd." He held up a paper. A forged adoption form, Lucas guessed. Goes by the name Roxy. Ring a bell. Behind Lucas, Freya appeared in the doorway, her eyes locked on the man. Her body froze. Then she backed up slowly, tail low, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The man's eyes flicked past Lucas, and his voice shifted. "I'll be needing her back." Lucas stood taller. "She's not going anywhere." The man smiled, but his eyes were cold. "We'll see about that." Freya retreated to the corner of the cabin after the man left. She didn't lie down. She didn't relax. She just watched the door, pacing slowly, as if waiting for it to open again. Lucas sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He felt torn helpless against whatever false authority the man carried, and afraid that the law might side with paper. Over pain, then Freya came to him, sat down quietly, rested her head on his knee. He looked down at her. "I won't let him take you." Her body stilled, her trembling stopped. She met his gaze, and in that one look, he understood. She was trusting him with her life. Neither of them slept. Freya moved in slow, tight circles, her ears twitching at every creak of wood. Lucas tried to rest, but his mind raced. Images of her suffering, the man's smug smile, the threat of loss, it all pulsed like a storm in his chest. He sat at the kitchen table, fists clenched, a cup of cold tea untouched. Every time Freya passed him, her tail brushed his leg. It was small, but it reminded him she was still here, still counting on him, and he couldn't let her down. It was just after sunrise, when the man returned. No knocking this time, just footsteps on the porch, and a hand trying the door. Lucas opened it before he could force his way in. "I told you," Lucas began. "I've got backup this time." The man interrupted, voice sharp. "And next time, I bring the sheriff. I'm taking what's mine." But then came a growl, low, deep. Freya stepped between them, her body rigid, ears pinned back, her teeth bared. It wasn't fear. It was furious. She planted herself in front of Lucas like a shield, every hair bristling. The man took one step back. For the first time, his confidence cracked. "She doesn't want you," Lucas said, voice quiet but firm. "And neither do I." As soon as the man drove off, Lucas picked up the phone. His hands shook as he dialed the ranger station. "This is Lucas Hallberg. I have information on a dog from that fighting ring." He explained everything. The rope, the injuries, the man, the fear. Freya sat beside him, her head against his thigh, calm now. When he hung up, he looked down at her. "It's time to end this, isn't it?" She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. It didn't take long. Freya's microchip, buried under a scarf, told the truth. Her real name, her stolen status, her past. Photos matched the man. Witnesses came forward. The paper trail was fake. The injuries on her body were enough to charge him. The arrest happened quietly. The ring, they said, would fall next. But for Lucas, the only sound that mattered was Freya's breath soft. Beside him that night, she didn't have to run anymore. She was home. The harsh white of winter slowly faded, and in its place came color greens pushing through the earth. Icy creeks thawing into song, and sunlight softening everything it touched. Lucas walked the ridge trail in a steady rhythm, Freya trotting ahead, her steps light and sure. Her limp had lessened. The jagged look in her eyes had softened. She no longer checked over her shoulder, and Lucas, as he stood taller now, he didn't feel the weight in his chest anymore, the one that used to clutch him in silence, that pressed against his lungs every time he thought of the past. He no longer walked to forget. He walked to be present with her. She looked like a different dog. Her coat, once dulled and patchy, now shimmered gold in the sunlight. Her eyes no longer darted in fear, but scanned with curiosity. One afternoon, a group of hikers passed them. On the trail, Freya didn't cower. She stood beside Lucas's tail, low but relaxed. One of the hikers commented on how beautiful she was. Lucas beamed. "Yeah, she's something special." He hadn't smiled like that in years, not the hollow kind, but a real, open one. It caught even him off guard. Freya nudged his leg with her nose, as if to say, "You're smiling again." Back at the cabin, Lucas began to write. Not survival logs or supply list stories. He wrote about the cave, about the storm, about the girl with amber eyes who had more scars than fur, and the way she taught him to feel again. The words came slowly at first, then all at once pages filling with honesty he hadn't allowed himself to express since the avalanche. When he finished the first story, he read it aloud to Freya. She lay curled near the fireplace, one ear twitching with each word. He paused and looked at her. "You're the reason I picked up a pen again." She blinked slowly, content, and for the first time in a long time, Lucas didn't feel like a man with a past. He felt like a man with something to share. Lucas used to climb to disappear. The wind and altitude were his way of vanishing from memory, from feeling, from pain. But now, with Freya beside him, every ascent felt different. He moved slower, took in more, showed her trails he'd once walked alone. She chased butterflies through wildflowers. He laughed when she slid down the snowbanks like a child. They didn't speak the same language, but they understood each other better than most people ever could. These mountains weren't just escape anymore. They were home. The fire crackled gently in the hearth. Outside, night blanketed the valley in stillness. Lucas sat with a mug in hand, eyes scanning the small wooden mantel. On one side, a photo of his wife smiling in summer light. On the other, a new photo, Freya mid-run, ears flying, joy frozen in time. He stood, picked up the photo of Freya, and gently placed it beside his wife's. Two souls who had changed his life. One who taught him how to love, the other who taught him how to live again. "Thank you," he whispered, voice barely above the fire's hiss. Freya stirred in her sleep, curled at his feet. The cabin, for the first time in years, felt whole. Lucas stood by the window, watching Freya as she lay curled by the hearth, her body rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. It struck him then how quietly she had entered his life. No grand rescue, no heroic moment. Just a broken creature trembling in a cave, asking nothing, and yet her presence had shifted something massive inside him. He used to believe healing came with time, more with distance, but it hadn't. Not until this silent creature had taken one step toward him in the middle of a storm. That's how healing had come, wrapped in fur, saying nothing, needing only to be trusted. Freya could have fled, could have hidden behind instinct and memory and pain, but she hadn't. She stayed, not because she had to, but because she chose to, and in her choice, Lucas saw something he'd nearly given up on faith. She trusted again, not blindly, but willingly, despite the hurt, despite the past. That was the most courageous thing he had ever witnessed. When he carried her out of that cave, Lucas had believed he was doing the rescuing, giving her a second chance, offering her safety. But every moment since then has told a different story. It was her steady presence, her silence, her trust, that pulled him from the void of grief he'd buried himself in. She didn't ask for anything. She simply stayed him through that, gave him a reason to look forward again. She saved him. It had taken only a season, one long winter of storms, fear, recovery, and quiet moments beside the fire. Lucas had lost everything. Freya had been thrown away, but together through trust, through choice, through love, they found a new beginning, not loud, not perfect, but real. They belonged not just in the mountains, not just in the cabin, but with each other. And in that simple truth, everything else finally made sense.